Hey, so we are live on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks so much for joining me. So, I have a question for you. Do you struggle with academic language? Do you struggle with using academic language versus informal language when you're doing your social media posts? If so, then today's topic is for you. Hi, y'all. Thanks so much for joining me. In less than 15 minutes, I'll be sharing with you 3 ways that you can make that switch from that academic language into that informal language for your social media posts. Like and share this video if you get value from it. And if you're listening to the recording on the podcast, thanks so much for joining, and drop a heart in there. Really appreciate your support. So I'm Dr. P. I'm a strategic business coach, and I've been a school psychologist for 10 years in K-12 schools in the U.S. I've also served on professional organization committees, and I've been a part-time faculty member for online graduate psychology courses at the master's level. I've taught over 10 of those types of courses. So yeah, I'm sure you can also already pick up on the fact that why this topic is so near and dear for me, because it truly is something that I struggle with, right? And I continue to struggle with it. And the thing is that writing social media posts, first time I ever wrote one, I did use those same features that you're taught for APA, because I have a history of writing informal language, because I spent years completing my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, my specialist degree, my doctoral degrees, and in each one of those programs, I was required to do any type of writing using APA style format, right? So I had to use my writing had to be consistent with that style. So needless to say, those are all those, all those years of writing, I had to actually follow that specific style of writing. And I know some of you, it might be MLA. The thing is whether or not it's MLA or if it is APA style of writing, there were certain things that are consistent for each one of those, because each one of them had a manual. They had a procedure, a process that you had to follow to make sure that you're following that APA style or that MLA style, right? And those structures included what they considered to be the good structure for a good sentence. They also included, when to capitalize the first word in some first letter in some words, or when to capitalize the first letter in first word of a sentence, all of those type of grammatical and spelling things that you're supposed to be paying attention to, how much to indent your first line in your paragraph, how many sentences to include in a paragraph, the number of topics that you should be really including in a paragraph, even included how you're supposed to cite a reference that you're using when you're supposed to cite that reference, the verb tenses that you should be using in your writing, how to put a heading, the type of heading, how to put a graph, a chart, you name it. These writing styles have all of those information spelled out in their manual, and you had to follow that. And there are tons more in there. But if you're familiar with APA and MLA, you understand where I'm coming from. Lot of different steps that you had to always remember, right? And for my dissertation, let me tell you, there were points in the dissertation where there was a person who was checking my usage for APA style. And when it got to the point of publishing, there was yet another checkpoint for someone to look to see whether or not I followed APA style, throughout my dissertation, writing it all up, right? And if there were any errors, and trust me, there were some, then it was sent back to me, and I had to fix it if I wanted to go on to the next level. Because again, there's so many different requirements for writing following APA style. And to remember them all, I don't even know who remembers all of them. I just remember having to sit with my manual and go through it. So it is a challenge, when you have that history of academic language, and then you're going into this realm of social media, right? Because the style of language that you use is different, because you don't want to use academic language when you're doing your social media posts. Because the thing is that academic language is formal. With your social media posts, you want to be informal, because informal is more personable. Informal shows more emotions, and it has more empathy when you're using informal language. So that is completely different to formal academic language that doesn't have that personal connection. So for me, that was a struggle, and it still is a struggle sometimes, depending on the topic that I want to be posting. Because again, leaving academics, in terms of doing my degrees and going out into my career school psychology, I didn't leave APA behind. It was still there. Because when you're sending your emails to your supervisor, you're using that formal language. When you're sending it to coworkers, you're using that formal language. In our psychoeducational reports we had to write, we were still using formal academic language. And working in professional organizations, working on position statement writing teams, guess what? More academic formal language. Those are the things that I had to be using, when we're doing those written correspondences. And doing that switch wasn't that easy for me. Because anytime it came to write it, my mind automatically went to, okay, you got to write it in this formal way of writing, right? But the thing is that I realized the posts that I would look at, the posts that I would respond to, weren't necessarily posts that had that formal writing in there. Like a mini training going on in their post, or a mini teachable moment in, this formal way of writing. There were posts that I could connect to, posts that were written informally and posts that had that personable touch. And I was like, oh my gosh, how are these people able to do this? Because that's so hard. So I remember there was this time when I was working with one of my coaches. We got to talking about, the ad copy and how you actually write it. And for me, again, I shared the fact that writing thing is difficult, because once I start to write it, I'm going into that academic world and, have this whole research thing going on. And there's this preamble, and it's like nobody really wants to listen to that because it's kind of boring to most people. So it's really looking at that informal way of writing. So I got to talking to my coach about the fact that talking to me is more informal than writing. So it was this whole, okay, well, practice, saying what I want to write in the ad before I write it. But that didn't always work, because once I got to writing, guess what? My brain switched over into academic way of writing. So that kind of went through the door, and it was really difficult and still continues to be difficult for me. So for me, I didn't give up. So I did look at ways in which I can help myself grow. And I know some of you might be saying, why put yourself through all that stress? You could just hire somebody to write all your copy for you. That is true. That's an option for many of you. But for some of us, who want to learn a skill and who see the need and the value in understanding how to make that switch, and most importantly, you want to connect with others, you want to do that networking with others, you do need to learn when and how to use formal versus informal, right? Because again, informal language is more personal. And that's why I wanted to share this today, because this is something I still struggle with. And I use these tips that I want to share with you. Did I mention 3 tips that I want to share with you that help me out with this battle? And it is something that even when I read over a post, I'm like, oh, that sounds a little too academic-y. So let me go back over, because I want to make sure it's something that connect with others. Because here's what I realized. There ain't nobody who's walking around with the little APA manual or the MLA manual and reading my social media posts and going, nope, she's not following that format. Let's take it down. Come on. There ain't nobody doing that, right? So that's something I had to really be aware of. Because again, history of going through the degrees and the careers where, that was the expected way of writing, it is a difficult switch for me. Something I still struggle with. So yes, formal language is good for your business emails. It is good for your official documents, for your legal documents, for writing reports, especially to your board, or writing reports for your own business purposes. But informal language is much better in social media posts, in conversations, maybe not with some superiors that you might have that you're reporting to, but in conversations, in networking situations, in text messages. That's why informal language can be very helpful. So those 3 tips I want to share with you before we run out of time here. Those 3 tips are this. When to use informal language in your social media posts, you use it when you use these things called contractions. So instead of saying things like, I will go to the store, the contraction would be, I'll go to the store. Because let's be honest, when we talk, we're more likely to say I'll versus I will. So you're using that informal language. Then in informal language, you use emojis. You don't use emojis in academic formal language. No, you don't. But you can use emojis in your informal language. But don't overuse them though, because people don't want to be reading a post that's just made up of emojis. You do want to know when and where to include your emojis. And then my favorite part for using informal language is you get to use your colloquial language. Because let's be honest, all of us, regardless of wherever we grew up, there is that colloquial language that existed around us. That language that was used in conversation, that when you were going through school, you were not allowed to use in your actual essays, right? So think of that conversational language and use that language when you're writing your social media posts. And this is going to include the slang that you grew up with, the different figures of speech that you use in conversation, and put those things in your posts. Use that language in your posts. Yes, not everybody might understand your slang. Not everybody might understand a certain figure of speech that you're using. But remember this though. Not everyone is your target audience. Just remember that. So whoever you're targeting, those are the people who are going to understand your posts. Those are the people who are going to be sharing with you and who are going to engage with you and your post. So again, think of how you talk and put that in your social media posts. So remember, informal language is more personal. It's a better way of displaying empathy and emotion. So next social media post that you do, think of your informal language. Think of how you talk and put that into your writing. Message me if you want to learn more information. Remember, solutions plus actions equals results. Thanks y'all so much for joining me. Bye.